We made it all the way through.
All right, man. Hey, everyone. Thanks for being here this morning on the Brooklyn Lockdown with my good friend Jason Loughlin, who is making his triumphant return. And hopefully the audio will be better this time than it was the last time. Jason was the first guy, my first guest when I started doing this. And it was an audio disaster, but an excellent lesson. So super psyched to have Jason back on. We have links to Jason's courses and everything he does at jasonloughlin.com, and the link is in the description, and Phil is going to post it. And also Jason is going to teach a lesson today, and there's a PDF that is in the description as well, and it's also, Phil can throw that up. Phil Mingan, the excellent moderator who makes this so much easier for me to do. Thank you, Phil. And so Jason, you got to take it away, and then we'll talk, and then all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. Hey, so I thought I would do a lesson on major sixth chord and inversions and ways you could use them in country music, and I'll show you a couple other styles you could use them too. So sixth chord, just a major chord with the sixth note of the scale added, and it gives you this really nice kind of lush sound without giving you any kind of like dominant sound, without giving you a major seven. It's when you're comping like in swing, it's a great color note to add that doesn't really have any momentum in it, and it doesn't really give too much away for a chord's quality. So I'm going to do this in C. I'm going to use it over this same track we just kind of played over here. So I'm starting with the root position C chord, and wherever there's a fifth, just go up a whole step and you can find that six. And all these are going to be in that PDF too. So then I'm going to go to the third of the C. Normally the first inversion there with the third on the bottom would look like this. I'm finding my fifth, which is on the G string, and I'm bringing it up a whole step. So now I have another inversion of the sixth chord. This next one I'm going to drop down an octave, make it a little easier. So here's C chord. So I have two fifths here on the D and G string. I'm going to bring those up a whole step, and then I end up with this shape here. Excuse me. So you might notice that all these look like A minor chords, and they're the relative minor chord, so you're using the six, which is what the relative minor scale is built off of. So yeah, they look exactly like that, but they're acting different because it's happening over a C chord, not over an A minor chord. So once you have these inversions, some ways that I usually go through and play them when I'm playing country music is I'll grab three notes at a time or three strings at a time. And I'm grabbing with pick, and let me make sure you could kind of see. Okay. So I'm grabbing with pick and middle and ring here. So I'm either grabbing the bottom three and breaking it into two sets, bottom three or the top three strings. And you might want to just play around with that for a second, get comfortable with that. The other thing that I throw in there is I throw in a lot of half step approaches. So I'll just drop the whole chord down a half step, and then come back up to pitch. And I'll do that with the bottom set of 3 too. My hand's holding the whole chord. I'm just grabbing 3 strings at a time. And you could slide in and out of that to get more of like a lap steel type sound. And try that with the other inversions. So what you would like to do first is just learn these for, one chord and kind of explore it a little bit, get comfortable with it. Whenever you're learning one of these kind of concepts, it's good just to kind of go around the circle of fourths at first, or what you could do is just learn them over like a 1-4-5. So I would recommend doing this for C, F, and G, because at least this way you could play over a 1-4-5 progression in C. So anything I did here, I would also do an F. Next inversion. I would do it in G. And then C. So I'll bring up a track, and I'm just going to kind of move around, and then we'll talk about, layering some other kind of layers and nuance here to make the sound even cooler. Let's see here. Here we go. Okay, so that's just moving it around the progression, not doing any kind of chromatic connections or anything like that, or even really trying to play in a position and using any kind of good voice leading yet. It's just kind of jumping around. So the next thing you want to do is get comfortable with playing these things in a position. So I'm going to go up here to this root position C, and then I'm going to look for the closest F. So the closest one I could do is here off of the 6. Looks like a D minor chord. The closest G I could do is the first inversion, the one that's off of the 3rd. And then back to the 1. So I'm going to bring up track again and try to stay in position this time. Okay, so now I want to go to the next position and do the same thing. This is like a good plan of attack for a lot of things here. So I'm going to go up here to this first inversion of C. Look for my closest inversion of the F. So that's a root position 1 up there. Closest inversion of the G. That's off of the 6th note. Looks like an E minor chord. I'm going to bring up the track and practice it up there now. Okay, and then the last one would be off of the second inversion of the C. So I'm down here. I could do this up. It's just going to be a little hard to see, so I'll drop this down. So I got second inversion C. Closest F would be first inversion. top of the third. You're kind of in the middle of there, so if you want to jump down here and grab the root position F, it's totally fine. It's just as far away. But since we haven't done this one yet for F, let's do this one. And then for the G, I'm going to do root position. And then for the back to the C, and I'm adding the sixes here with the C. All right, so let's bring up a track and try it down there. Okay, so play around with that, try it in some different keys. Now I'm going to show you another cool trick that you could do with these things. By taking any one of these shapes and moving it down a whole step, you get access to a dominant 9 chord. So there's that root position C6 chord. If I just move it down a whole step, I'm getting the flat 7, 9, 5, and flat 7 of C. So real simple move to get access to a whole new chord quality. The other cool thing you could do is just add that little half step passing chord in between. Now we put in our string sets of 3 and our half step approaches. And we have a lot more melodic movement we could do here. And you could do that with each one of those inversions. So it's going to turn all those chords into dominant 7 chords, which is going to sound really good when your 1 chord's going to 4, when your 5 chord's going back to 1. So get comfortable with that on your F chord. You're not going to be able to get that E flat, but you can get the bottom 3 down there. And get it up here. There's a second inversion, first inversion. Then for the G, okay, and then I'm going to bring up the track again, and we're going to play around with those dominant 9s and that little passing chord. Okay, now one of the things I was doing in there was kind of cool, was I started to walk through all those inversions. I'll do this in F since it's going to cover the most real estate and be a little easier to see. So I got the F, you know, there's that first inversion, but in between there's that dominant 9, that's the whole step lower. So I can go to that first and then add that passing chord and then get into that first inversion F6 chord. So there's an F6, thinking of this as F dominant 9, little chromatic passing chord on my way to first inversion F6. And I could do the same thing moving into that second inversion here. So a whole step lower is the dominant 9. I could chromatically walk into it, put this all together. And then I have root position back up here, whole step below it, I have a dominant 9. So now I have all this nice chromatic movement, which is great if you want to do chord melodies. This stuff works great for, you know, blues, for jazz, for country. There's a lot of applications for it, but here it is all in order. I'll go up and down, going through all those inversions and those little chromatic passing chords. Okay, and then you would ideally do that with every one of these chords, and I'll try to put this in the solo for you so you can hear this. Okay, tons of movement that you could do. And then the other thing that's kind of fun with this is you could use these things as templates for building lines. So it doesn't always have to be this thing where you're grabbing 3 strings at a time. Once you feel comfortable with it, and you could see these shapes and you know how they sound, and you could go back and build lines around them. So I'm going to take this first inversion, C6 chord, and then that little trick where we move it down to a dominant 9. And I'm going to build a line through it. So I'm going to just take the top 3 strings of this, and I'm going to arpeggiate them, ascending. Maybe the next one I'll descend. Next one I'll ascend. So now I have this nice kind of jazzy line. And I could do that with any of these. Or I could pick a different pattern. I can go. That one's kind of nice to get rid of the half step passing chord and just move through these inversions on the top 3 strings. And I'm still kind of visualizing the whole chord. I'm just looking at the top of it. So let me show you that in context so you can kind of hear it, and then maybe we'll take some questions and stuff on this. All right, here we go. So kind of endless possibilities there. When you start to get into that, I would just kind of play around, and when you find things you like, write them down. Start to like make a list of cool licks and concepts and ideas, and build a little arsenal of ideas with those 6 chords. And yeah, maybe it's a good time now. They kind of threw a lot of stuff at everybody to kind of open it up. See if
I was off. I had my mic off, but I was laughing through a lot of it, going, "Oh, that's how you do that."
Okay.
No, this is freaking awesome. I can't wait to work on it because I love that sound, and it's so far removed from anything I do. And
well, not really, because Jeff, you do stuff like, and blues players in general, and rock players do. You know, hey, it's like if this was a blues, you know, you're doing those moves. Like that's a pretty common move,
sure.
Right? You're doing that kind of move of a 6 chord to a dominant 9. That's essentially what's happening.
It's funny because I never really see it.
There it is.
Right, no, I got you, but I don't see it in the same way. That's pretty cool. Wow. Yeah. So, man, this is amazing. Thank you. This is so a ton of information. So let me see if there's any questions. First thing, once again,
sure.
That Jason has his website there, jasonloughlin.com. Are there any TrueFire courses that cover this as well? So maybe we can direct people towards those.
Yeah, definitely. The lap steel. There's a whole section of lap steel voicings on the Country Guitar Survival Guide for Lead. Mm-hmm. There's it kind of gets into this a bit and shows you these concepts, but it also gives you 2 etudes that are really fun. 2 levels of etudes or levels of interaction, really, using all the lap steel voicings. And there's a lot of other techniques that I haven't talked about yet that you could use with them. They really get you into more of a lap steel sound. Mm-hmm. There's some cool Speedy West tricks in there and some tone sweeps and stuff. That's a good one. And then I use it again in the surf course that I did, that essential surf course. There's a Hawaiian.
Oh yeah. That's a great course.
Tune I wrote. Yeah, thanks, man. I like that one. There's a little Hawaiian tune that I wrote that's just really, leaning it heavy into the more of the Hawaiian sound with 6 chords rather than the country thing. And that's got some challenging stuff in it too. So I would say either one of those if you want to, get some pieces under your belt to just kind of open up your ears and your hands to some new kind of ways of doing it. I would check those out.
Cool. All right, great. Thanks. So I'm going to look at some questions here. We have a few. I think you covered a lot. I think my question is, how do I go through all of this? So what would you say, that's my question when I look for other questions that people have posted, but what would you say is the best place to start with this? Because I think you gave such a ton of information. So what would you say first for someone who's looking at this going, what do I do with this?
I would say start with just root positions. This is like a good plan of approach that's worked for, we both know you have to come at things from a million different perspectives, but here's one that works and that helps and is a good place to start. Start with like a root position, and then just get into that habit of maybe half-step approaches and grabbing sets of 3 strings. And then when it goes to F, just go to a root position F. When it goes to G, do root position. Spend some time doing that. Maybe you could set a timer for like 2 minutes or something, or like I'm going to go around the progression, 4 times or something. And then go back and go to your first inversion with the third. Because as you're doing this, you're getting comfortable with where all these things are, but you're also getting comfortable with how they sound, how it sounds when you're using that first inversion, how it sounds when you're using the second, the root position. You're also trying to like build up your ear, not just fretboard knowledge in your hand. Goes to F, I go to first inversion of F. First inversion of G.
Yeah.
First inversion of E, or C.
I can do that. Okay, good.
Yeah, and then you do second inversion, and then I would say that, once you kind of got those 3 inversions, again, you can set a timer, do like 2 or 3 minutes on each. Then go through and do 3 positions where you're kind of finding the closest one. So there's your root position C, and then you have to stop and think, okay, well, where's the closest F that I could mess with? So the closest inversion of F would be the second inversion. It's the one that looks like a D minor. Closest inversion of G from that position would be the first inversion with a third in the bass. So we'll start there, and then you go to the next inversion, look for the closest inversions of that 1-4-5. Second inversion of the C, closest inversion.
Of the inversion of the 6 chord.
Of the 6 chords. So you're doing first you're doing just on inversions by themselves and kind of doing that big parallel motion, just jumping around, and then you're doing 3 positions where you're trying to voice lead them. That's like a good place to start, just to get your mind around the inversions and where the closest ones are. And then you could start introducing the dominant 9 with each of them, and you could do the same thing where you start with root position if you want. Right.
Well, it's interesting because when you're playing it, I'm hearing that inversion of the F6 as a D minor chord. If you guys were listening too, that's interesting to see that inversion of the 6 chord is not obviously, but it is a minor chord. So it heard out of context in a way without the D and the bass.
Note.
Without the F, I'm hearing it as a D minor. If that makes sense. So can you talk about that just for a second?
Sure. Yeah. So the part of the thing that makes guitar great and really friendly is also the thing that can kind of trip you up in a lot of ways, which is, we have these familiar shapes that are great because I know that shape. That's a D minor shape. Cool. But it's not sounding as D minor or acting as D minor at all.
Right.
So I always say it's you kind of have this shape in your hands, cool, but the sooner you could stop thinking of it as D minor, and when you're playing over F, start thinking of an F, the better, because otherwise it's like you live in New York and you want to go to Detroit, but the only way you know how to get to Detroit is to go to California, is to drive to California. So
Yeah.
it's like, why are you going to California to go to Detroit? Just it's quicker this way.
Mhm.
So you just want to get quicker at, making a straight line for yourself, theory-wise to what these things are. But so it's so similar because the sixth note of the scale is what the natural minor scale is built on. It's where the relative minor key is built off of. So, you have this shape that looks so familiar to you, but by putting that different bass note in there, the roles of all these notes change. If it's in D minor, it sounds like the root, a flat third, a fifth, a root. Second you get that F in there, all the characters are acting differently. Now it's acting as a six, it's acting as a root, it's acting as a third, it's acting as a six.
Mm-hmm.
So all these things sound different to me. It's like their color changed, and how I embellish them is going to be different. If I'm playing in D minor, I'm kind of embellishing these things differently. But if I'm doing the same shape in F, I'm probably not going to go. Let's see here. Here's what we'll do.
Oh yeah.
There we go. Doesn't sound right. So, but if I treat it as F, and I bring attention to those notes as like root, third, fifth, or for what they are.
Mm-hmm. Right. No, that's a great answer. Right. To hear them as hear them as what you're hearing them as, a sixth chord as opposed to a minor chord, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So
it's like these things. It's like we bring this up all the time. It's like visualizing chord shapes and everything. Mm-hmm. It's great, but that's like the great Cliff Notes aspect of guitar. Mm-hmm. That when you're on your way to getting to the point where you really do know where all the notes are and how they're definitely acting against every chord, which is ultimately where you want to be.
Yeah.
These things can help you get there. They can help you with templates for soloing. They could help you with opening your ears to new things. Nothing wrong with that at all. But then it's on you to start to get to the next level where you stop thinking of it as a D minor chord and start thinking of it as an F6 chord, because that's the way it's acting.
S.E. Nesbitt asked, and I'm not sure if I understand the question, so maybe you want to rephrase it, but I just want to ask because he's on all the time, great supporter. So, Jason, you use these 6th to 7th moves to use relative dominance. Is that a question? I'm not sure.
I think I talked. I think what you're asking is what I was showing before, which is that move of moving a 6th chord down a whole step to get a dominant.
Okay.
But do I do like a relative dominant chord? Are you asking, do I use them as secondary dominant chords?
Yeah.
And the answer would be kind of sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I'll do, if I'm in C, sometimes I'll do, if I'm going between voicings, I use secondary dominant chords a lot in lines and in chords where I'll do like C, G7, C. Mm-hmm. And I'll have that as part of my movement. So there's a secondary dominant chord. I might do it here too. Like here's a C6, G7 to a C. And I build lines like that a lot too. I'll do like, so in my mind, I'm going C, G, C7. I'll do that down here too. I'll do like C, G, C.
Nice.
So even though when things are just like hanging on a one chord, I'll do lines like that. In my mind, I'm going do ba da ba da ba da ba da. So I use secondary. If that's what he's asking, I use secondary dominants all the time. I use secondary subdominants all the time for building lines and for chord melody stuff.
Gotta remember that from school again. Secondary subdominants. All right.
Four chord. The four. It's like Keith Richards' whole career is built on secondary subdominants.
That's funny.
It's like all you're doing is like 4/1. It's like plagal cadence after plagal cadence.
Yep. Plagal cadence. Wow, I haven't thought about it. The term. I haven't used the term. Plagal
It'll be a
cadence.
test.
All right, we're going now. We're really dorking out.
Yeah.
Inside baseball, as they call it. All right, so a few more good questions coming in. Devin Galdeau, not probably about pronunciation, horrible on me. Jason, are you doing alternate bass with any of these? Are you playing any alternate bass parts? Or you could, I'm assuming, but
Yeah, I mean, if I was doing like Chet kind of,
yeah, sure, why not?
if I was doing that, yes, I mean, Chet does this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He'll do like that voicing pops up in Chet tunes every once in a while, where your thumb is playing C and he's playing a dominant 9 on top, or that's actually a 13 since I have my first fingers on an A there. But when I'm playing Chet stuff, I'm really playing his arrangements. I'm not like improvising a ton of stuff in the style of Chet. I mean, sometimes I do that when I'm playing rockabilly, and I could be a little bit more aggressive, and if I'm a little bit sloppy, it's okay, because it's rockabilly and it kind of adds to the chaoticness of that music. It needs to sound a little punk anyway. But when I'm playing Chet arrangements, I'm kind of just doing. His arrangements are so damn perfect and amazing, and I'm just trying to get through them. I feel like I'm back in juries and in college every time I play. Before all the lockdown kind of happened, me and John Shannon were doing a lot of shows where we were doing like 2 or 3 sets of nothing but Chet Atkins arrangements, which is like, those tunes are like 2 minutes long.
Yeah.
So it means like our set list is like.
I know. I was at some of the shows.
Yeah. You have to like learn so many tunes just to like, it's not like a typical set where it's like, oh yeah, 8 to 10 or 11 tunes gets you through a set. It's like a Chet set is like 16, 20 tunes or something.
Super demanding.
But, that stuff is like, I'm always just kind of like, every time I get to the end of one and it's like I haven't made that many mistakes and it sounds good, I'm just wiping my brow and like, just like psyched.
I made it.
It's just stupid. It's like the most stressful gig I do.
Yeah. Well, it's you're definitely putting yourself to the test on that stuff.
Oh yeah, there's nothing. You realize how much heavy lifting is involved in solo guitar.
Yeah.
When you get into it, it's like, oh man, I miss a band right now.
So Devin's asking, are there also dominant? Are the dominant 9 still the same chord shape as the 6? It's hard to see. So
yeah, it's all those shapes. You don't have to change the shape at all, and they just move down. I mean, there's a million different voicings and inversions of dominant 9 chords, but this is just like a quick way to get, with very little work, just take one voicing and move it down a whole step. And as long as the bass note stays the same, it sounds now as a dominant 9.
Right.
So again, if I'm here, my fingers aren't, I'm just moving. The shape isn't moving at all. It's root 3, 6, root, down a whole step. It's flat 7, 9, 5, flat 7.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do that with any of those 3 or 2 inversions, root position and 2 inversions.
Damien, how do I use these shapes to create Hawaiian sounds?
A lot of like half step approaches, you kind of lean more into like the sliding aspect of things. Let me get some plate reverb going on here.
I just happen to have one in my pocket.
I got an EMT plate in the other room.
Yeah.
So a lot of times what I'll do with these is for Hawaiian stuff, it's, first of all, harmony is very different and that works in your favor. I don't know what it is about harmony when it comes to Hawaiian music and cowboy music. Like they share, there's some weird parallels that I've yet to figure out why harmonically those things are so similar. There's a lot of like swing changes in Hawaiian music, and same thing with cowboy music, almost have like swing changes, very much not country at all. But there's a lot of like flat 6 chords that you hear. Mm-hmm. So a lot of like half step approach chords, and these help you get in that world
right.
Pretty quickly. So going down to a flat 6 is a really big move it from going from C to A flat. And really leaning on those half-step approaches to chord changes. That's like another big one. And in a lot of Hawaiian music, everyone in the band does that. So you might have, and then before the one chord, you might have, like the whole band will do that half-step approach. So if, I do that with these, and then for that one chord, really leaning into that stuff. And you could always do this trick too if you want to get those nice harmonics. There's a nice trick that steel players do that you could do on guitar, depending on the shape, different results. But if you use the side of your hand here and take here's a C6 chord, looks like an A minor shape, but a C6 chord. And then if I take my hand and I kind of make it parallel with the strings here, kind of covering really the 5th fret up an octave. So I'm at the 17th fret, and then with my pick, I'm going through. So I don't know how loud that's coming.
No, I can hear it. No, yeah, totally.
So that's like a nice thing to do, and sometimes I'll do that as like a half-step approach thing.
I learned that from Van Halen.
Does he do that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, totally. He invented it.
What tunes does he do that in?
Well, he does. Oh man, a lot of times he'll slap it to you, like in like.
That's a different thing. Yeah.
Oh, no, he does that too, where he plays the chord and swipes it with his hand for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so he's doing that.
Yeah, he does that, but he also, you've seen him, do the same thing you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously, you could do it like pick and first finger doing the.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just.
You're playing Stairway to Heaven.
The note up an octave. Use your first finger to kind of just gently, touch the string, and then behind it with my pick, I'm picking the note. Well, a lot of you might already know this technique, but the key is to get away from it once you do it, so this note can bloom.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a nice one. And then the other one you could do if you're doing these. Here's a Speedy West trick for you. If you're doing the half step, a dominant 9 into a 6 chord with that little half step approach, you could do this either direction, but you kind of hit the open strings and then hammer onto the shape. That's like a thing that Speedy West would do a lot too, where he'd hammer on with the bar.
Okay.
I'll do that every once in a while. It's kind of a cool technique. Too much of any of this stuff gets goofy real fast.
Yeah, it's like, all about the moderation of it, so.
Yeah, and it's like, it's okay to have some cheese in when you're doing the Hawaiian stuff. It's it's supposed to be kind of beautiful, and if you're doing the country jazz stuff, you could really go full cheese, and that helps you.
Full cheese. I like full
cheese.
Let's go full cheese.
Full on monster.
Okay, what course? Some people are asking what course that you mentioned earlier that covers some of this stuff.
The surf course has the Hawaiian tune in it.
Mm-hmm.
The survival guide for lead guitar has a couple of lap steel etudes in it that are really fun. And that stuff I'm doing, my pots desperately need to be changed. So, sorry for the scratchiness, but in that stuff I'm doing a lot of these kind of volume swells.
What is that noise? Kidding.
Yeah, I know, it's bad. These pots are old.
Just messing with you.
The other thing I'll do is the
right, the tone knobs thing. Yeah.
So just grabbing those, any kind of chord or any kind of voicing, moving down, you could do that with the tone sweeps. That's a cool sound too. And again, it's a steel player thing. But tele players do it a lot because, players like Danny Gatton made it really popular, and I'm sure there's a ton of other players before him that were kind of doing that stuff,
Sure.
or at least doing the tone sweeps.
Phil, our moderator, said Val and his wife used to go out skiing out west every year and learn to two-step at the $1 Million Bar in Wyoming. Now they put on your music and do the two-step in the living room.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, fantastic.
All right.
Okay, so now let's talk about a few things you got going on. Thank you for that. I mean, I'm looking forward to, in all my spare time, to get in the country swing.
Remember when we used to practice all day?
What was that like? Oh my God, yeah. Well, I think I talked about this in the last breakdown when you were on. You asked me to do a gig with you. We played at the rodeo. No, not the rodeo bar. Geez, that was a long time before that. Hill Country. No, the first Hill Country. And you're like, I know it's fine. And then like taking a solo on some of your stuff. I'm like, what? It's funny because I'm so used to playing like flat sevens on the. It was like, and you're like, yeah, no flat sevens. And in that gig, I was like, oh, don't play any flat sevens. Play a six. And then I finally got like, I get it now. Okay, like
right.
Not that I've mastered it. But at least I stopped sounding like total crap. So
it's true. It's like in a lot of that music, like when you're playing the swing stuff, especially, it's like the flat seven is really being used the way it was originally like kind of intended as like,
5-1,
as a 5 chord. All the momentum that's inherently in a 5 chord.
Yeah.
Going back to a 1 chord.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's a lot of times you're playing with major sevens and sixes and. You're not really hitting a flat 7 until that moment you're ready to really pull everyone into a 4 chord or a 5 chord back. Yeah. You start leaning on it and hanging on it the way you do, we do in rock or blues or something like that. And it's just like,
right. You're so used to it.
Sticks out like a sore thumb. Yep. Here's the other one that like sticks out like a sore thumb to me. It's like when people bend a flat 3.
Mm-hmm.
When you're playing swing stuff, that's just like, rarely happens on early swing. And if you listen to like players like Louis Armstrong and like Charlie Christian, like Django, it's rarely a flat 3. It's the 2 that gets that quarter step bend.
Oh wow! It's totally cool, man. You're totally. Of course you're right. Of course you're right, but.
I could always tell right away, like when someone starts doing that, I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. They're not idiomatically, correct yet. I didn't know that. That's cool. All right, so that's a great. So what he's saying is, don't bend the flat 3, bend the 2.
Bend the 2. That quarter step bend that we're also used to doing. It works so much music. But if you're trying to play, country swing, or you're trying to play swing music, or or even like rockabilly, if you're just trying to do more kind of classic kind of rockabilly, which is so rooted in swing music.
Yeah.
Go for the 2. Go for the quarter step bend on the 2.
I'm making notes right now.
Yeah, a little better. Yeah.
So next time we do a gig, if there's ever a gig again, play the 2.
Yeah.
All right. We won't go in that road. So you have a few things that I want to talk about. You have a True Fire channel, which is super cool. If you want to talk about that, and you've got a guitar. So we'll talk about the channel first.
Yeah. So in the channel, there's a really cool arrangement of Hey Good Lookin', the Hank Williams tune, all in lap steel voicings. Oh. So there's another, place that you can kind of get used to these things. Mm-hmm. And it's like full chord melody. So there's a good tune that you could just kind of play. People know what you're playing. You could sit down and play an instrumental. So there's that in there. And then this month I'm adding, a couple months ago, I added my tune Tango and Cash from the record Peach Crate, and a lot of people were digging that and the Roomba kind of thing and wanted to have a solo over that. So I'm going to be talking about that this week, and I'm also going to be using some of those voicings for 2 5s. So if G minor, C7, F. Kind of gets you into the more islandy kind of, exotica sound. But that channel, there's probably 3 main style focuses. There's country, rockabilly, and like jazz / kind of Western swing. And every month I've been adding a lesson with 3 different levels of kind of interaction, beginning, intermediate, and advanced. just focusing on solo. Some months I'm focusing in on rhythm guitar playing. And then I have other sections in there that, talk about compositional devices. So this is ways we can improve as soloists. There's fretboard knowledge section, there's technique. There's a section up there for people who are total beginners, which I just add to every month. Also, so anyone who is just, brand new to guitar, there is a whole section of the channel that's for you in there. And then I have sections that, like, periodically I add to Chet Atkins arrangements, blues, jazz, and stuff. So, but every month I have a handful of things that I'm always feeding. And then I just listen to people in the channel if somebody wants to say, hey, how do you do that? And as long as like a couple people are asking for the same thing, it's just like, okay, yeah.
Right. Do you have your video of you playing with Jim Brewer opening up for Metallica in there?
No, I don't.
You did. Come on, just tell the story. You opened up for Metallica playing in Jim Brewer's band. That is.
Me and Mike Tishy did this for I think Mike still does it from time to time, but I did it for about a year, and it was so stupid and fun. And it's just like me and Mike still joke. It's like, because Jim's whole thing at the time was to do this like heavy metal dad act and just, write these like kind of goofy tunes. But at one point he had a version of this heavy metal bingo, the classic kind of kids tune bingo, but we did heavy. This is so ridiculous. And it was like me and Mike just keep joking about like the balls to go out in front of like
Metallica.
No, right? It's like nothing earned about this at all. And play this like heavy metal version of bingo, which was like super fun, and like he's imitating all these like great heavy metal singers, which he does insanely well. Like he could do Brian Johnson so great, and he could do like Ozzy so great. The Brian Johnson thing blows me away when we would cover.
It's perfect. Yeah, it's Brian Johnson.
You just close your eyes and you're like, dude, I don't know another singer that can do that.
I think they were on Howard Stern together, where they were going back and forth on a.
I gotta hear that. That was a really fun gig. And then the I think one of the ones that we did was Wecken.
You did
the largest like.
Oh, you went to Germany? You did the Wacken festival in
Germany. Wacken, that's
Wacken, yeah. Oh, of course, man, a metalhead, yeah.
And it was like to 60. Like when we went on, it was like 60,000 people.
Did it go over well?
It was. I think it's hard to tell, like because it's like that's basically you're playing in front of a town and like people were into it, but. You're also like, when you play stages that side, you're so far away from the audience.
Sure.
It is kind of weird.
Yeah.
It's weird to get used to. But I remember like right before we went out, it was like right as they were introducing us, and Jim like, hits me in the chest and he's like, all right, man, just go out and like rip a solo for a while. And I was like, what? No, I'm not doing that. Like, what are you talking? He's like, you just go out and
just shred.
Just shred some solo and like get the crowd all pumped up. Get 60,000 people pumped up. Like
now,
I was like, this is like it's terrifying to me, right? So I'm like,
and you were there with the Telly and a Princeton, right? Like clean toe.
Like I think I had a JCM 800 and
you had your Les Paul, right?
Les Paul custom,
yeah. The other side of Jason that nobody knows,
So I went out and like I'm not like a shredder by any means, so like my way of like getting through this was like, okay, this is a good lesson, and lean into your strengths and work, but like, okay, well I understand like harmony pretty well, and I could do a bunch of cool weird bitonal crazy shit, and like so I ended up doing all these like weird bitonal riffs and like E minor to B flat major and like like sweeping all through that stuff and like and then just like fell into a riff that I knew I could like pump my fist to and put a foot on the monitor.
I'd love to see that.
Oh man.
I've got a friend who lives in Germany, not far from there. It's like, it's just a metal area. Like that whole part of Germany is just full of metalheads. Like that is
that's it. It's so bizarre because you're out in the country, like an hour.
Yeah.
You're an hour, like,
that's the premier metal show.
South or west or something of Hamburg. But so I did that, and then Jim came out, and it was like, and it was it was hilarious. And then I remember the second night that we played a smaller stage, and of course you're using all backline amps you don't know about. So like, go to play, and like halfway through the first song, the amp just starts like just you're just like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
Like just like, just terrible, and there's like nothing you could do, and of course everyone's looking at you
Like it's your fault.
when a backline thing goes down.
I
It's
know.
like, of course,
What's wrong with you?
yeah, it's like it must be you.
Yeah.
And I just remember like someone in the audience like yelling Spinal Tap, and like everyone.
Oh
was just,
man.
like, and I'm like, this is so perfect. Like, and of course, I don't know. It's so fun and whatever. It's like it's supposed to be lighthearted and fun. So
Yeah.
I'm like, it's hilarious and embarrassing, but it's still hilarious. And it's like I'm not.
Well, you got to in those moments, like it's hard to say it's not my fault. Like it's not my amp. It's what was here. I had the same thing happen before a gig in Switzerland. We both had Marshalls, and first sound check. Check. And they're like, oh, and we were like some rural area, and they're like, well, the next one we can get is mine, but I live like an hour away, and we're like, so like an hour there and an hour back, and I'm like, so. Same kind of thing,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It's
always.
like, you have to laugh at it, and I think the only thing that helps is like just doing a million gigs, so you have enough like gigs that go great and they're so super fun.
Yeah.
That the 5% of ones where it's just sabotage, you're just like.
What was your worst gig experience? What was that? I would love these stories. You have one that jumps out. I got a few.
Worst gig experience.
Or embarrassing, maybe not something beyond your control. You know what I mean? It doesn't, whatever. I just something that pops into your head.
Man, I'm sure I've had some bad ones. I've had ones when when I was young and like boozing, where I was on stage and just felt like hell.
Well, I mean more like just funny stuff. I've got to, you want me to start?
I know.
Okay, cool.
I have one from fairly recently, and I blame Luca Benedetti for this. It was just one of those things where I should have said no, and I didn't.
Right, and you knew better.
And like Luca, who's like a friend of ours, who's I've probably played more gigs with than any other guitar player, and I love him to death, and he's a fantastic guitar player.
Yeah, he is.
He just did a whole tour with like Tony Scher and John Coward and Steve Gadd, and like it was just like great guitar player. And he played in String Gliders, and we played in North Amarillo together for a long time. But anyway, he's playing a gig where he's doing all this like New Orleans instrumental stuff and like original tunes, and and like
Brooklyn Boogaloo thing.
Not the Brooklyn Boogaloo thing, like not that thing, but like his like own gig.
Okay.
And it's Tony Mason on drums, and I forget who was playing bass, and it was what's his name, Eric Deutsch on key. It was just like a great
band, yeah, great bunch of players.
Band. Yeah. And I came in like, just peek in, listen, because I live like 4 blocks from this joint, and they sounded killer, and like I know a handful of tunes. I'm not an expert on that style at all, and I was like, hey, you want to get up and play some? I was like, yeah, I'll play some, thinking that like we would play together.
Yeah.
And they just like gives me the guitar, walks away.
Dude.
And I just like, which is fine normally, but I had this complete mental block of like, I can't think of any appropriate songs right now. It was just one of those moments, like complete brain fart. I can't think of anything. And it was like the most embarrassing thing that could happen when like someone in the band goes, hey, so you just want to play a blues? And you're like, oh.
Okay, Crossroads. Let's Stormy Monday.
It's like the kiss of death when someone goes, hey, do you want to play a blues? It's just like, it just means like it's like you've failed at all good suggestions.
Exactly. And then you start playing Stormy Monday to really kill it, right? Like for Stormy Monday, for instance, like when on it, I love the Allman Brothers version. I love T-Bone Walker's version. But we've done so many workshops and gone to jams and run workshops, and somebody's like, "Oh, let's do Stormy Monday," and you're like, because it's gonna be like 8 guys soloing over a slow blues with 3 choruses each.
It's the Sweet Caroline of blues.
Yeah. Or it's like Little Wing,
the brown-eyed girl of jam sessions,
or Little Wing, which the original version is one of the greatest things ever. Right. But even Jimmy didn't solo over the whole. He soloed over the end when he played it live. He played it as a 3-minute tune, and he was in perfect guitar solo, and he was out. People call that in jams. I want to shoot myself.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that one at least has the potential to be
Right.
cool if people like don't try to be Jimi Hendrix and try to lean into like a thing in a mood and like
Yeah.
and like you said, like don't stretch it. Sometimes, you know, it's like there's a potency in how long
Yeah.
something lasts, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
And it's like a tune is cool or a solo is cool if it's a certain length. And the second you start going beyond that,
Yeah.
you just get diminished returns on, you know, no matter how cool the stuff is that you're playing.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard for someone to like place chorus upon chorus upon chorus
Of Story Monday.
of Story Money, especially
Yeah.
something like that, where
Yeah.
it's like, you know, when everyone is just kind of comping and not a lot of like, it's not jazz. So there's not a lot of
Right.
like, you know, interaction and changing and
Yeah.
playing off each other's as much as
Yeah.
like if you were playing a jazz tune where you can get away because everybody is adding variations and tweaking, you know, when it's just the
Yeah, yeah.
shuffle, you're just like, dude.
I know. Yeah, the same
Yeah.
3 chords every night. So my fun one, it wasn't my fault, so it's even kind of funnier. We had a drummer who, he's departed now, unfortunately. A bit of a live wire, you know, just one of those kind of guys who was a ton of fun, but a completely, like, what's going to happen today kind of guy, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Which,
Yeah.
for better or for worse, I love the guy, but I was in a band called Liquid Hips, and we were in Europe, and I forget what town we're in. Sound check, pretty big place, and it was really full, you know. And we went back to the hotel room to get ready, and then which is a bit of a distance away, because it's kind of one of those towns, you know, you're on the other side of town, and they don't always put you at the best hotel, you know. So we get on stage, the band was called Liquid Hips. Ladies and gentlemen, Liquid Hips, the curtain comes up, he goes, "I left my sticks at the hotel." No drumsticks anywhere. Then it's like, boo. You know, the clerk comes back down. You hear people booing in the
Oh
audience.
man.
So we finally get some drumsticks. The tour manager gets in the hotel and back. Probably about like 35 minutes later, 40 minutes later, people have left. You know, it was just the worst. Where you're like, oh man, you know. I love those kind of things. You know. Yeah. Oh, I've been accused of interrupting. Let me address that, Mark.
Okay.
Like, there is a delay between my mic and his when it broadcasts. We are having a regular conversation, and it doesn't interrupt. So it's something I cannot figure out in terms of audio-video delay. So he and I are having a completely normal conversation, and if I have to pause where it seems like I don't let him finish his sentence, I'm actually uncomfortably long pause in a natural conversation after him. So I try to remember that, but it's really annoying when I watch it back too. I'm like, God, I sound like I'm stepping all over people's conversation when I'm actually not. So it is some sort of weirdo thing I have not been able to figure out. So
Yeah.
I want
think
to.
everyone has to get hip to like remember it's like, first of all, we're all guitar players here. This is all like we're all figuring this out, and everyone who hasn't tried doing this before, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, is you would really be surprised at how difficult this is, and the fact that you pull this off is kind of amazing. It's a total pain in the butt, and it's like there's all these variables that are out of your control. And it's just, you know, everyone's doing generally like the best that they can. And there's just all this stuff, you know, sometimes you just have to close your eyes and just kind of, you know, we have to just kind of accept it for what it is and love it unconditionally because it is not friendly right now. Hopefully the technology will catch up, but right now it's just not.
Now I've uncomfortably paused, and it doesn't sound like I'm interrupting you. I'm not giving you a hard time, Mark. It was something that drives me nuts when I watch the stuff back. And I'm going, God, I sound like I'm just not letting people finish their sentence. So I'm glad you brought it up. I understand that why. I could see why it's annoying, because it annoys me on the replay. And doesn't that feel weird if I waited that long for you to...
That feels like typical of you if you're ready to give me a snarky, like, ball-busting comment. That's like usually like your move. You'll like stop and very straight-faced stare at me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll get some sort of ball-busting comment.
I don't know what you mean.
Right.
Anyway, So yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Mark. It is something that like like you said, technology. But it's been fun. Like I've been really enjoying this. I think people are digging the conversations with this stuff because I like certainly the lesson part, but I love people really seem to love when we're talking about uh, just this kind of stuff. Gigs.
Yeah. Yeah, I love like the same here. It's like I love hearing people talk about because every gig is a lesson. Whether it's navigating a new personality or navigating a sound issue or a new venue or musician. It's just like everyone. There's like a ton to learn. So it's like every time somebody's sharing a story, it's entertaining for every reason because it's like, oh, I've experienced that. That's fun. I've never experienced that. That's interesting. I've experienced that. That's a nightmare. Like it's always fun. It's like, how long have we all been doing this for? And I still love hearing stories from other musicians about, gigs that, went great or nosedive. They're still totally entertaining.
Well, I think it was Angus Clark had said, no matter what size stage you're on, gigs never change. Like the same thing goes wrong, whether you're playing the Enormo Dome or you're playing, you're playing your basement or a small gig. All right, so a few quick things. I just want to point out next week, I have Brett Papa is going to be on the show.
Oh, cool.
I'm looking forward to that. Brett's such a great dude. And I got a course coming out with Brett that was beginning during, when everything kind of came down. So I've got to finish it up with him. We're going to be coming out. So Brett's on next Saturday morning. Now, you have a guitar made for you, right? You have your own signature guitar. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we're still dialing it in. It's a brand new thing. But I get asked about this Telecaster a lot. Which has been my main guitar, for probably 6 or 7 years now. This is, the guitar I use for pretty much every gig around town. I get asked a lot about the pickups. I get asked a lot about the fact that I have an aluminum saddle, all these little details about this stuff. So, a couple people have asked me all the specs because they wanted to make their own, which, I'm happy to share and everything. But at some point I was just like, man, it'd be kind of fun to just make a little run of these. And I had that idea like about a year or two ago. And then I was like, does anyone really care about that? But a couple people reached out to Lou Feminella, who's a guitar builder and luthier here in Brooklyn who works on, a lot of
my guitars too. Yeah.
Worked on your guitars. He works on a lot of my stuff, works on Campolongo stuff. I think he just built a guitar for Campolongo and Luca and, tons of folks. But he got a couple emails about it, asking if people could build a guitar like mine. So both of us are just like, maybe we should just do a little run and just see what happens. And so we're going to do like 5 of them, I think is the plan. I think one's already spoken for, but I played like the prototype and it's great. I mean, it's amazing how, just to have like this thing having like little babies, it's just like, it's so funny to see 2 of them next to each other. But he does it all in nitro. All of the necks, he gets like fatback necks and he like shapes them so they're, all by hand. So they're exactly like this neck, which is soft V to a C. This is kind of modeled after a 53 Esquire that I played. And it's kind of a bigger neck, like a 94 to an inch. It does all the nitro, and he has a couple other little things that he does that I like a lot. Like he uses just a different jack, and gets rid of that old telly jack that was always coming loose, and does like, hand oiled on the neck and everything. But they sound great. They play great. They're pretty much all one-piece ash. I think because one-piece ash is getting so hard to get nowadays. It's just becoming like, I think Fender stopped even building with. A lot of companies are just, it's just so difficult because there's so little of it because of, it's not growing really because of environmental issues and everything else. So I think there's a few of them that are one-piece ash, and then there's 1 or 2 that are book matched. And I've seen the book match ones, and they're light. The grain is beautiful. It's like, the ones I saw was like almost impossible to tell. The grain was like really, the way it was book matched looked awesome. So anyway, if anyone's interested, you could either ask me about it, or you could reach out to Lou Feminella at Feminella Custom Guitars. He can answer any questions. And I think, all you have to do is like put down a deposit, and then he could, finish one up for you. But they're affordable. They're all handmade guitars, like, pretty much like boutique guitars. And I forget exactly the price, but I think we're looking at like $2,500,
Which
which is like, it's still $2,500. And I understand that's like not nothing, but, for a boutique handmade instrument that's, not CC'd neck or anything like that, I think it's pretty darn reasonable.
I've played Lou's stuff, and he's done work on my guitars. He does great stuff. I'm interested. Interested in checking your guitar out, or I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. If you like it, and you put your name on it, come on,
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, if I have to like all these, and they have to be something that makes me forget about this one. And even the prototype that he brought over, which was, he's worked on this guitar so many times, he kind of did the prototype basically from memory. It was kind of crazy how close the neck already was from memory. But he left a little meat on there because he wasn't exactly sure. But I was playing it for like 3 or 4 days. I just kind of forgot about this. I kept picking it up, and it was like, oh, that's my guitar. It was like, so. I know he's made a bunch of tweaks to the original one, and we're going to get together, I think, this week and do another round of, just double checking everything, making sure they're exact before we start taking photos and demoing it and everything. But yeah, anyway, if anyone's interested, there's that, and then the other thing that I want to mention, if you don't mind, was the
yeah, man.
We talk about the channel, which is great. I'd love to see folks in the channel. Was the YouTube series that I'm going to be starting here. Ideally, it's going to be a lot of different episodes, but this series that I'm going to start now is called Inspired by Giants. And the whole idea is just, if you're in a creative rut and you're looking for just some kind of inspiration that is coming from a totally different source, like kind of left to center, not typical guitar-centric, music or guitar-centric education, but it's almost like a lesson in looking for inspiration. So the first episode is on the Fibonacci series, and using that series of numbers as kind of a jumping off point to just try to be creative and try to make something new or think about guitar in a different way than you would usually do. So the first 2 episodes, Fibonacci series, and the next one is on cubism. And so I take all these ideas that are just kind of external from music, although there will be some that, come from, like, say, classical composers or something like that. And I just kind of break them down for what they are, and I just pick things out of them to go like, oh, what if I thought about it like this, and how could I apply that to harmony, or how could I think about compositions this way? And so it's kind of watching me explore ideas, and I go down some roads that yield nothing, and I go down, that's part of the process, and then I go down other roads that end up giving me some cool ideas and ways of thinking that I might not have done if I only got all of my inspiration from guitar. It's like this part of the thing that I always feel like I'm fighting. The older I get and the more and more I play guitar, is working on music and learning music outside of the filter of this instrument. There are certain things, like sometimes, like, I don't want to think like a guitar player. I want to think like a musician, and I know that sounds obnoxious, but what I mean by that is, like, I don't want everything to be going through the same old tropes of all your chord inversions, and here's how you finger that scale, and here's how you think of this harmony, and here's these sets. I want to try to come at it from a different way, and just to get me thinking about something different, and try to be inspired to play something new that I wouldn't usually. So that's what that whole series is going to be about. And I hope you guys check it out.
When is that launching?
That's a good question. I filmed like a little version of it because, like we were talking about before, we're, learning all these extra skill sets, especially now. I learned a bunch of stuff about video editing, and so I'm doing another kind of shot at this now that I had a bunch of uh, uh, I basically took a lesson in Premiere Pro just because there's so much
Yeah.
stuff I didn't know how to do.
Mhm.
Like it's like how often as a professional musician am I using editing software for video? Like, it's all new to me. So I'm taking another shot at this thing, just trying to get it look a little nicer
Mhm.
and get it flow a little bit better. So hopefully over the next couple days, I'll have something to be able to post the first episode. Um, and then, I'm hoping to get one up every 2 weeks or so, because there is a little, like, you could guess from these titles, there is a little bit of come up with ideas and then think about it a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, some cool ways I could deal with this. I mean, the whole series is as much for me as it is for anyone else watching it. It's basically documenting my little, weird explorations on this stuff.
Well, maybe as people have figured out that you and I are good friends outside of this YouTube discussion. And what's cool is, we talk about a lot of these things anyway, just the other things that are just not guitar related, which plenty other interests than just the instrument, and how these things can influence the way you play. And I think it's important. I know I sometimes get too guitaristic, in my thinking about stuff, and I think about painters I like, or you go to the Met when and you're like, oh, there's the other things that you can draw upon.
Yeah.
It's the same muscle basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I'll give you like a little, trailer. Like with, the Fibonacci series. I'll go into, I'm not going to give you the whole thing now, but basically it's a series of numbers. And without explaining it all completely right now, it's 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, and this series of numbers goes on forever. And what I did was, the first thing I did was just take the first handful of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and I was just like, well, what if I use this as note groupings? And what if I go like, well, like maybe my first phrase has one note in it. Maybe my next phrase has two notes in it. Maybe my next phrase has 3. Next phrase has 5. Next phrase has 8. Next phrase has 5 again. Next phrase is 3. And then 2. Next phrase 1. And it was really challenging to do, to kind of keep track of all that. To keep track of the numbers in each phrase, but it made me shift my focus completely from like note choices as being so important, or having that thing that like guitar players always feel like they have to outline the changes all the time and like beat the listener over the head with like, here's all the notes that make up that chord. Like, not necessarily. Like, it gets you out of that world and made me like really hyper focus on phrases and number of notes in a phrase. And even though it's, a listener isn't counting notes, it did seem like everything went together. It did seem like there was like an underlining kind of emulsifier that held the solos together when I was soloing that way. So it was something that was, perceived by a listener, myself included, when I listen back, because of course I'm like, critically, like, is this worth it? Was this even a thing that I should, keep doing? And like when I listened back, I was like, yeah, there's something there, that like that solo has like an arc and has a, there's something else going on that holds it all together. And it was, part of it was that those note groupings. So yeah, it's just nice to kind of come at this stuff differently. And like,
Right.
I think we were talking like a week or so ago, like, I've been taking lessons again too, but not with guitar play. Like I haven't taken a lesson with a guitar player in a long time, to be honest. Like, but taking lessons with a jazz pianist, and it's great. It's just, they think about harmony. They could get inside harmony so much deeper than we can.
Yeah.
And there's just things to learn from them that just gets out of this instrument, and we're just talking music. And that's always refreshing, especially when you've been on this thing your whole life. It's just nice to get away, think differently about it.
Yeah. Cool. I think we've been on for an hour and 15. People are really digging the conversation, which is a ton of fun. One last question, S.C. Nesbitt. Do you have a course, or are you planning on doing a course that gets into chicken picking at maybe like a gentle kind of curve?
Oh, like more of a beginner kind of
I assume
intro
so.
to
Yeah.
chicken picking. It's tough right now. Is like, hey, no courses are being done right now.
Right.
But the two courses I was supposed to do was a survival guide for rockabilly, a rockabilly connections course, like the country connections and the blues connections, and a playing outside the changes course. But I would be open to doing basically I'm doing a lot of that stuff in the channel, to be honest.
Ding.
Because I always have a beginner intermediate version of whatever is happening there. So, if you're looking for something like that, rather than, go through the course, the channel is so affordable and there's tons of stuff up there. And then it's just like, it's a direct line to me. So if there's something you have a direct question about or you want to see more of, just ask and I'll throw a lesson up for it, So that would be like the best place to go to for something like that. But if enough people reached out and were wanting it, because, these things take a lot to kind of put together, and, we have to make sure that we're making them for more than 3 people. But if enough people were asking about it and wanted something like that, I'd be totally up for doing a kind of self-produced course during this whole, pandemic thing now that I could put up on the channel too. So I don't know, that's the best place to get to me about that.
And also the channels to me are, I'll be launching mine pretty soon. Kind of like a Patreon way. You can look at that as well. But you're getting something for your money as well. You're helping us out because we see that money directly. If you like what we're doing, we're pricing them at a point where it's like 2 cups of coffee or more than that, less than that if you live in New York.
Sure.
And then, we get that money, and it's like a Patreon thing where you're supporting what we do. We like what we do. And in turn, you're actually getting something for it as opposed to, you're getting really good content. So once again, thanks so much for being here, man.
Oh man, thanks for having me back.
Oh yeah.
I hope the audio was much better for everybody, and
I've been here. It's great.
Glad we got to do it again.
So jasonloughlin.com, and his TrueFire course is there. You've got all this stuff. You've got the Speakeasy, which is his TrueFire channel, and his guitar. So you can contact you directly about the guitar.
Yeah, either me or Feminella Custom,
right.
And he'll answer any questions you have about it too.
Fantastic, and I can attest that Lou does fantastic work. And I will be here once again on Wednesday, live at 4 p.m. Thanks for everybody for that. That's been going great. People really seem to be enjoying those, so thank you so much. And then next Saturday morning, 11, will be Brett Papa Stash is coming in. That should be a ton of fun. And so until the next one, I'll see you later. Thanks, Jason. I'll talk to you later
Thanks,
anyway.
Jeff.
Yeah, man. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.